All right, today we're going to jump into a single powerful chapter in the Bible, Mark chapter 7, to really unpack a timeless debate. So whether this is your first time reading it or your 100th, we're going to explore its core message together. Let's get right into it.
You know, at the heart of this entire chapter is a huge question, one that really makes you think about religion and what it all means. Is being right with God all about following the rules, checking all the boxes, or is it about something deeper? That's the conflict we're about to dive into. And yeah, that conflict kicks off right away. It starts with this major showdown between Jesus and the religious top dogs of his day. It really is a classic clash between man-made tradition and actual truth. So, get this. A group of Pharisees and scribes travels a really long way. We're talking 90 miles, all the way from Jerusalem. But here's the kicker. They're not coming to learn from Jesus. Nope. They've made this long trip just to find something wrong, to criticize him. And it doesn't take them long to find an issue. They see some of Jesus' disciples eating with what they call defiled hands. Now, this is so important to understand. This has nothing to do with washing off germs. Defiled here means ceremonially unclean. The disciples were breaking a rule that people had made up, not a rule that actually came from God. And this slide just lays it out perfectly. You see, the religious leaders had piled on all these extra rules, like this special way of washing your hands, your cups, even your furniture. And they started treating their own traditions like they were just as important as God's actual commands. You know, the big ones, like honoring your parents or loving your neighbor. Well, Jesus doesn't let this slide. He calls them out on it, point blank. He calls it hypocrisy. He basically says, you guys are experts at putting on a religious show. You say all the right things, but your hearts, they're not in it at all. They're miles away from God. And then Jesus just drops this bombshell. This one statement completely flips their entire religious world upside down. He says that the stuff that really makes a person unclean before God doesn't come from the outside. It's not about the food you eat. It comes from the inside out. So what's this stuff on the inside? Well, Jesus gives a list, and it's pretty heavy. We're talking about evil thoughts, immorality, theft, greed, pride, all the attitudes and actions that start deep inside the human heart. The point is crystal clear. God cares way more about the condition of our soul than the rituals we perform. Okay, so how does this whole idea play out in the real world? Well, right after this intense debate, Jesus leaves town and heads into foreign territory. And what happens next is a perfect and really surprising example of this principle in action. He goes to a place called Tyre, which is a pagan area. And there, this woman approaches him. Now, you have to understand, she is a total outsider. She's not Jewish. To those religious leaders Jesus was just arguing with, both this woman and the place she was from would have been seen as unclean. But she comes right up to Jesus, begging him to heal her daughter. Jesus' first response seems kind of harsh, right? He uses this common saying to test her. The children, in this analogy, are the people of Israel. And the dogs, well, that was a pretty nasty term used back then for non-Jews. He's basically saying, my mission is to my own people first. Why should I help an outsider? But her comeback is just incredible. It's so humble, but also so clever and full of faith. She doesn't argue. She basically says, you're right, Lord. I get it. I'm not asking for a seat at the dinner table. I'm just asking for a crumb that falls to the floor. She had this amazing faith that even a tiny crumb of his power was more than enough. And because of that amazing answer, because of her faith, Jesus heals her daughter. Just like that, from a distance. It's this incredible moment that shows us that it's faith, not your background, not where you're from, that really matters to Jesus. The chapter isn't over yet. It wraps up with one last story, a really personal, physical healing that once again shows Jesus' focus on compassion, not just empty rules. So now Jesus is in another non-Jewish area, and a crowd brings him a man who is deaf and has a serious speech impediment. And they just ask Jesus to lay his hands on him. But what Jesus does next is, well, it's pretty strange. First, he pulls the man away from everyone to have a private moment. Then he does all these physical things. He puts his fingers in the man's ears. He spits and touches the man's tongue. He looks up to heaven and lets out this deep sigh. For a man who couldn't hear words, these actions were like a language of their own, a way of showing his compassion before saying the one Aramaic word, iphatha, which just means be opened. And bam! Instantly, the man can hear perfectly and speak clearly.
The crowd is just floored. They're completely astonished, and they start saying, "He has done all things well." They saw more than just a miracle. They saw someone with this deep compassion who made people whole again.
So, you've got these three totally different stories: a tense debate, a conversation with an outsider, and a really unique healing. What's the thread that ties them all together? What's the big takeaway here?
Well, it boils down to a few key things. First, it's about our heart, not just our habits. God cares way more about what's going on inside of us than our religious performance. Second, it's faith over heritage. That outsider woman with genuine faith was praised, while the religious insiders were criticized. Third, it's compassion over ritual. We see that Jesus' power isn't just for show. It's always connected to this deep, personal compassion. And finally, if you put it all together, true spiritual cleanliness is an inside job. It starts in the heart.
And that leaves us with one last thing to think about. Jesus really pushed back against the religious rules of his time that were missing the whole point. So, it makes you wonder, what accepted rules or traditions in our world today might he challenge? What are the things we focus on externally that might be causing us to completely ignore what's going on in our own hearts?